Hello, class, and today we are once again looking at Donkey Kong. So if you remember from our last class, we talked about what we would consider the good or positive aspects of the levels game design, and we talked about what we would consider the more negative aspects. So to summarize, last time we talked about how the game establishes what your objective is, and we established that the objective is to rescue the princess, which we can see at the top left from Donkey Kong. And we established that in multiple ways. So first we established that the color was more bright and more vibrant, which made the objective more clear to see. We talked about how in the first level all of the platforms went diagonal and sort of led you up to the boss. And then we talked about how the objectives of the obstacles of the barrel sometimes stood in the way of our goal. So here we are at the second level, and I think that the best way we can start off this video is to compare the first level to the second level. So here, just like in the first level, we start at the bottom left, and our objective is found at the top left. So we are still set with the same idea. The game is telling us, hey, this is going to be very similar to the first level. Your objective is still to make it to the top left and rescue the princess from Donkey Kong. That is still your objective. We know that because we are placed in the exact same position from the first level to the second level, and Donkey Kong and the princess are in the same exact position from the first to the second level. So, in terms of our objective, nothing has changed. We need to make it to the top left and rescue the princess. But what we'll notice right away is that our level design is much, much different. So, last time we talked about how the level design of the first level aided us in understanding our objective and how to get there. So, the platforms in the first level were diagonal, and they left. So we were at the bottom left, and the platform rose from the bottom left to the top right. And then there was a ladder leading to the next one, and that went further up. And then we got another ladder, and that one went further up, until finally we got to the point of where Donkey Kong is. Here, however, we no longer have that. The level design itself is no longer acting as a guide to the objective. And we can see that through the fact that these platforms are flat. So we talked about how the diagonal platforms led us in the direction of going up. No matter whether you're going left or right, they always went up. Here, the platforms are just flat. They're not leaning towards the objective in any way. And on top of that, there isn't a clear pathway that we can see that we have to go. There's many ways we can go. So, if we take a look at the game here, we can see that we have a choice of immediately climbing this ladder to get to the top over here, or we can jump to this elevator here. Either way, whether we jump on the elevator to start with, or we go up to this top platform or this middle platform above us, we have to get to this elevator. But we have multiple ways of getting here. Then from this elevator, we have to get on either this top platform or this bottom platform, which is guarded by this flame sprite that we saw last time. Then we have another elevator here that is moving in the opposite direction. So this elevator goes up, this bottom elevator goes down. Then from the second elevator, we can either continue going up, or we can go down and then start working our way up. So we have a way to go through the top and the bottom at nearly every point in this level. We have another flame sprite over here that is guarding this section. And then we also have these springs that are flowing from the top and then falling straight down. So we have something similar to the barrels here in that something's being thrown at us, but we're not being threatened by it immediately either. Just to reset the level so we don't lose any time. So we see that the level itself has now started to work against us. In the first level, the design was helping us. It was telling us, okay, you need to go up. Here, the level design is all over the place. There are platforms just straight and not leading anywhere. You can go up, you can go down. So the level isn't helping us anymore, but the developers have given us a kind of freedom to solve this level. The first level, there is only one way to proceed through the level. Only one. You have to go across each platform and go up the ladders. Here, you can use a ladder, you could not use a ladder. You can use the elevator, you could not use the elevator. I mean, there are many different ways to go through the top or the bottom here. Excuse me. On top of that, our flame sprite here now has a different role. So, from the first level, if you remember, the flame sprite acted as a kind of timer, almost. Where after the first barrel fell and touched the oil barrel at the bottom, it spawned the flame sprite, and then the flame sprite would move directly behind us and kind of chase us. And that forced us to start moving immediately. So it kind of acted as kind of like a push, like, hey, you should really start moving now. Here we don't have that. We don't have anything that is rushing us here. Instead, what's going on is that the flame sprites are being used to guard or protect parts of the level. So instead of the flame sprites pushing us to move forward from left to right here, instead the flames are going up and down these ladders and crossing these platforms, specifically this one in the middle, and then this section over here on the right that has this bottom platform where the flame sprite is, the ladder, the platform above it, that ladder, and then protecting this pocketbook sprite. So now with this objective, now we see that the game is taking the same enemy and is using them in different ways. So the game has showed us that now it will try to use things you've already experienced in different ways. So instead of acting as the timer or the thing to push us along, now it's acting as a guardian of the path we need to go. And instead of running away from it, we need to... we're still running away from it, but it's more like we're specifically avoiding it this time. It's not chasing us. It's acting as an obstacle. So, on top of that, we'll notice between the differences between the first and the second level is that we don't have any hammers here. So if you remember, there were 2 or 3 hammers on the first level, and they were always to the left. And what would happen is that you would jump and collect the hammer, and then Mario would start swinging the hammer and break objectives in front of him. Break the barrels in front of him. That way he could avoid, getting run over. Here we do not have barrels, and we do not have hammers. So the game is telling us that we're going to be experiencing many different things. There's going to be different obstacles, different objectives. Every level is not going to be the same. And it is appropriate that there are no hammers and that there are no barrels here at the same time. Because if you were to just have the hammer included in the second level, but no barrels, then the player would be tempted to be like, oh, what can I smash with this hammer? There's no barrels here. And on top of that, we learned last time that you can't jump with a hammer. So here, this whole level is jumping. You have to jump from one platform to the next. So having a hammer here wouldn't be productive. On top of that, we also don't have the barrel. We couldn't just have the barrel either. If we just had the barrel, then the player would be wondering, well, okay, there's barrels here. Why aren't we given the option to destroy them? On top of that, the barrels in the first level were able to roll down the platforms and were able to roll down ladders. Here, just like we were talking about, all of the platforms are flat. So the barrel wouldn't be able to roll because there's nothing downhill to go on. On top of that, think about the level design of the first level. All of the platforms were connected, so the barrel was able to fall from either going all the way down one edge or going down a ladder and was always able to make it to the bottom. Here, if we were to follow a path from Donkey Kong, it would start at Donkey Kong, it would move to the right, it would encounter this first ladder here, and then it wouldn't have anywhere else to go. It would just, fall. So, here we have a problem where this level, the differences in the way we have to proceed through this level actually inhibit different mechanics from the first level. So we can't use the hammer. We can't functionally use the barrels because of the design of the level. They can't roll and they can't properly get down ladders or to the platforms. And then because of that, we can't use the barrel. And then because we can't use the barrel, the hammer has no functionality here. So by not having either of them, it allows them to come up with new ideas, like having this flame sprite act as a guardian. Or what we'll talk about next is this spring. So here at the top left, instead of having a barrel, Donkey Kong is throwing these springs at us. And you can see they are bouncing diagonally as they cross platforms, and then once they reach a point where they can no longer bounce, they just fall. This acts as a major objective in place of the barrel, because regardless of whether you go along the top of where the umbrella is and then go to the right, or you go along the bottom, this spring will always land dead center in the space where you need to go. So it will pretty much always act as an obstacle or a barrier to what you need to do. There is a way we can completely avoid it if we go along the top, but it's important that we just know that there are ways to proceed. So let's think about how the game is sort of leading us in different directions. So from the start of the level, we have a choice of where we can go. We can hop on this elevator and cross the platform directly along the bottom, or we can wait to get to the top. We have a choice here. But the question is that which way do you think developers would want you to go? Do you think they would want you to go hop on this first platform that was right in front of Mario in the elevator and then cross along the bottom? Or would they want us to cross the top? And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how am does it really matter? It doesn't seem like there's any specific... If you can go either way, then it doesn't really matter, right? Why would the developers be giving us a certain way to go? If we take a look at the position and movement of the spring, you can see that it falls on this specific ladder all the way on the right. So if we were able to avoid that ladder, we would be able to avoid the spring. And we can do that by going along the top here. So if we climbed up here and climbed up the first ladder or the second ladder, crossed along the top, and then made it to the very first, this ladder all the way at the top that connects to Donkey Kong's platform, you can see we would almost completely avoid the spring. We would have to deal with it once we made it to Donkey Kong's platform, but we would be able to avoid it falling on us. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, if this is a better pathway, how is the developer subtly signaling to us that that is the way to go? And there are two things that I see, and there may be more that you see that I don't. So, the first thing is that we are placed directly on a platform which will lead us up. So right away when we start the level, we start at the bottom left and we are already on top of a ladder. And what do we do with ladders? We climb them. We go up. The same thing goes for the elevator that's right in front of us. This first elevator right here is going up. So the ladder and the elevator that's directly in front of us, both of them lead up. And without saying anything, the game has already given us a hint of, okay, why don't we start by going up? The second thing that is incentivizing us to go up is this umbrella here. So, we talked about how Donkey Kong and the Princess act as objectives, and they're distinct enough from the rest of the level for them to draw our attention, for them to draw our eyes. The same thing happens with this umbrella and also with this pocketbook or purse all the way on the right. These are brightly colored and they are different enough from the rest of the level that they stand out for us. On top of that, unlike the flame sprites and the spring that we see, they're not moving. So we can see from the spring that it moves along the top and it flows from Donkey Kong, and we learned from the last level that Donkey Kong throwing things at us is not good. This is moving and its intention is to harm us. The same thing goes for the flame sprites. They're flashing, they're moving, they have faces, they're shown to be enemies, and if we have already learned that when we touch them we will get hurt. Here we have the umbrella and the pocketbook not only be colorfully distinct enough for us to draw their attention, they're also not moving. They're not threatening. So typically things that aren't moving typically will not act as obstacles and will rather act as objectives and for us to get. And again, they're brightly colored and they don't appear threatening in any way. The flame sprite, fire bad. But the umbrella, I mean, what's the umbrella going to do to us? What possible reason could this umbrella hurt us? There isn't one. So, by having these first platforms lead us up and then give us an immediate little mini objective to get, the game is leading us upwards, which will lead us down the easier path. So, let's give it a shot here. Oh, my controller shut off. So you can see we head up, and then by running over that umbrella, we actually get points. Whoops. So, we can go and collect the umbrella to get points, so it acts as a mini objective, just like we thought. I almost thought I was a goner for a second. I thought I touched that. What? Now, I'll use this as a learning opportunity. That was very confusing. So right there, we jumped onto a platform and we just kind of died. and there is no clear indication as to why we died. The same thing happened when we fell next to the elevator here at the bottom left. There is no visual distinction between this bottom platform compared to the platform we're standing on, or the platform that we have right there. I don't know if that is a bug or if that is intentional, but we just died for no reason. And that is, I mean, very obvious. It comes from a very obvious perspective, but whenever a player fails an objective, they should understand why they failed it. If I run into a sprite, a flame sprite, that makes sense because that's an enemy, that's an objective. If I hit a barrel or I hit the spring, like, oh, I hit the moving objective, the moving obstacle rather. I got hit, I got hurt, I failed. Okay, here we did what we were supposed to do and landed on a platform and we died. So whether that is if that is intentional, that is a source of bad game design, because there is no reason why we should believe that we should have failed there. And if it's a bug, that is a case of not play testing enough to see what would happen if the player reaches that point. I'm going to reset the level here. So let's try this again. Come over here, we grab the umbrella, we grab the elevator, dodge the flame sprite. Yeah, you can see right here that we're able to stand on this, so we just must have been some kind of bug and we died for no reason. So we're going to avoid this real quick by standing there, and we complete the objective, we complete the level. So, the spring, I would say, didn't act as much of an obstacle as the barrels did. The barrels were constantly in our face, and here you can see that by taking the easier path that our eyes were kind of drawn to, we were able to almost completely ignore the spring. The only time we had to acknowledge the spring was when we were on the top platform, and we were able to avoid it just by standing still for a moment. I don't think that the spring is necessarily bad game design. I think it's good to have that objective to add something else in, but you can see how as an obstacle we have almost completely trivialized it. We took a pathway in which we didn't have to encounter it, and then we were able to avoid it like that. I didn't even have to like practice that. It just, I realized that, okay, it's going diagonal, we're gonna go over it. That this could debatably be good game design or bad design. So I would consider it to be good design in terms of it's very easy to understand what is going on with the spring. It always behaves in the exact same way. One of the criticisms that we had with the barrel was that it acted irrationally. It didn't have any rhyme or reason. It could go from one platform to the other. It could go down a ladder if it wanted to. It could go in any different direction. And because it was so random, we weren't able to necessarily figure out which way the barrel was going to go, and that creates a lot of issues with clarity. Here, the spring always moves and acts in the exact same way, so the player is able to look at it for a few seconds and understand that that's the way it's always going to behave, and that creates a sense of consistency. It gives us a sense of clarity, and it just helps us understand it better. The part where I would question about maybe not its design, but its implementation is because of how so easily trivialized it was. We were able to avoid it so easily, and we're able to make it a non-factor in terms of us traversing the level. The barrels in the last level were constantly in our face. They were constantly posing a threat. Same thing goes for the flame sprites. The flame sprite was constantly behind us. We didn't have a choice of going backwards, because if we did, the flame sprites would be after us. Here, if we move quickly enough, we can just zip right past the flame sprites, and then again, they become trivialized. So, In terms of design, I think that it's good. Its implementation, I think that's definitely more up to the interpretation by the player and by you guys. Do you provide an easy objective? I think that maybe for the first level, this would have definitely been something good, creating consistent, easy behavior that the player can learn and get past. Here, though, it almost acts as an easier obstacle than the barrels. And you don't necessarily... You as you create more levels, you want the level to be harder. And you don't... Randomness isn't really real difficulty. It's more like artificial difficulty. So and what I mean by that is that it's not hard because it's necessarily difficult or skillful or challenging. It's that there's no way to know. So with those barrels, it's artificial difficulty because there's no way of preparing yourself, of really knowing when or which way the barrel is going to come at you. There's no visible indication. So you're kind of just left up to taking random guesses, and sometimes that can just lead to you dying kind of unfairly. Here, we don't have any artificial difficulty, but we don't have any difficulty either. The spring just acts consistently, and if we move in the level the right way, we're just able to completely avoid it and negate its purpose, which is acting as an obstacle. You want to be able to implement obstacles and enemies that actually act as a challenge to the player, but you don't want to make it so easy and just trivialize it either. So that's definitely a criticism to take away from this. How the level design sort of changes that. I mean, there's many different ways you can change that spring around. You could make it so that it bounces between all of these platforms. So it starts bouncing from Donkey Kong, it touches this first platform where we see it fall, and then it could bounce along the bottom ones, and it can make a choice between, bouncing down and then getting onto one of the elevators. And then because the elevator is constantly moving, you could have the spring land on different positions. That creates a little bit of extra difficulty for the spring, but also keeps the behavior consistent, saying it will always bounce on whatever platform it lands on. But yeah. In terms of the level design, I think that it does a good job of allowing you to go any which way that you want. So let's for example here, let's reset the level and try and go along the bottom, just so we can see it's sort of like a comparison. So here we want to go along the bottom here, but that flame sprite is right there. So if we want to go on the bottom, we kind of have to hope that the flame sprite starts to... I made the same mistake twice. We have to hope that that flame sprite will start to go up. And here we have an opportunity to get there. So here... And here we are again with sort of these random, unclear deaths. Like, there's no reason why landing on that platform should have killed me. Yeah, see, that's very weird. There's not really a clear understanding as to why I'm dying right there. Is there fall damage? Can I not fall a certain distance? See, and the reason why this is bad is, as a player, I shouldn't be asking these questions. I shouldn't be asking, why am I dying? I keep forgetting which button is the B button for jumping. Kind of embarrassed now, but it's just so hard to try and figure this out. I mean, that should be a perfectly valid and legal jump. So why I'm dying is kind of weird. The only thing I can think of is if I fall from a certain height, am I going to die? But that doesn't make so much sense because I can get on that elevator and fall onto the elevator and be fine. So you can almost see here that going along the bottom, just going along the bottom with different pathways is kind of difficult. The game gives you all of these different platforms to use, and does a good job of incentivizing you to go up, but going down is almost a bit of a chore. It takes extra effort to go along the bottom. What I'll try is I'll try going along the top and try climbing down the ladder first. Okay. So it does look like falling a certain distance will hurt you. But again, that is not clear. That is not really clear that taking that much fall damage will do that to you. And then we have there, apparently you can get smushed by the elevator. So if the flame sprite, if you jump onto this elevator and the flame sprite happens to just move onto here, it's extremely difficult to try and get past this area unless you strictly go along the top and hope the flame sprite's not there. So the concept of taking fall damage isn't necessarily new to games, it's always been there, but here it's not expressed. There's not really a good way to understand it unless you die over and over, and then you make a guess. When you run into a barrel or you run into a flame sprite, it's very clear as to why you died. Hitting the floor and just dying when there's no visual indication that that is what's happening is really bad game design. The player should always have an understanding as to why they are dying. So the game does a good job of trying to presenting you two different choices, but the implementation is that just going one way is so vastly superior to the other. And I mean it's very much so. Going up avoids both flame sprites. It avoids the spring falling on you. And you only have to stand still for a moment to avoid the spring on the top platform. Whereas if you go along the bottom, you risk taking fall damage, you risk falling on the flame sprite, you risk getting hit by the spring as you're trying to traverse it. So it does a good job of showing you that there's two different ways to go, but it does a really bad job of implementing them both. One of them is too easy, I would say, to progress, and the other one is almost unviable to even try and progress through the level. Because you'll either die from fall damage, die from the spring, die from the flame sprite. There's just so many ways to die on one pathway, and on the other pathway there's so many ways to just avoid obstacles that what's the point of having a choice then at that point? But we do see that we just like the first level, we progress, we make it to Donkey Kong, and we save the princess again and complete the level. So, I think those are the major things to talk about in terms of this second level. So, as usual, there will be a assignment posted on Moodle to go alongside this. Good luck, and I hope you enjoyed this round of Donkey Kong. Thank you, guys.